Hello.
Can you please mute yourself? Okay, I'm gonna gavel in. It is 2:30. We call this September 8th, 2022 meeting of the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee meeting to order. Okay, Aaron, would you please do the roll call? Yes, Sean Baskey for Todd Van Ho.
Here.
Yemi Alini,
Present.
Brian Lindemood,
Also present.
Matt Stitchick. I don't see him online, but I did talk with him today, so we'll see if he shows up later. Steve Rebuffo.
Present.
Brad Coy. Here. Kent Colhase.
Here.
Luke Boland.
Here.
Jamie Acton.
Here.
Craig Lyon.
Present.
And Shanna Kilcoyne is excused.
Thank you, Aaron. If you'll please do the public involvement. Oh, let the record show that Matt Stitchick has arrived at 8:30 or 2:31.
8:31. Oh, boy, we're gonna.
Second.
Okay, AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by staff or consultants, after which the committee members can ask. Once the questions are done, it is then turned over to public or formal comments. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. Also, please mute yourself. And if you are joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Before we have the agenda, do we have a motion for approving the agenda?
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Rebuffo, seconded by Mr. Colhase. Do we have any changes to the agenda? And are there any objections to approving the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is the August 11, 2022 minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the August 11th, 2022 minutes. Second.
Moved by Mr. Colhase, seconded by Mr. Lyon. Do we have any objections to approving them? Okay, hearing none, the August 11th, 2022 minutes are approved. We'll move on to the agenda items, the action items, 5A, non-SOV targets. Will you be taking on that one, Aaron?
Yes, I will.
There you go for it.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing before us are the non-single occupancy vehicle targets, SOV. These are part of the congestion mitigation air quality measures. They fall in line with the previous targets you saw for the peak hour excessive delay, the PHED measures that were approved last month. So these are kind of a second set of measures that AMATS is responsible for. Similar to the PHED targets, these measures must be set coordinated with DOT, and they must have the same target. So it's a combined unified target. It's not DOT sets their target and then AMATS sets a target. They have to have the same targets. This measure is a little easier to gather data for than the PHED measure. There are 3 We'll unmute when it comes to public comment time. There are 3 options of data that you can use. The first is from the American Community Survey, the ACS, which is a yearly survey of community that provides information all across the country. It's kind of the big stopgap between the census data. The next can be from a travel survey that you do, but it has to be no more than 2 years prior to the start of the performance period. So your travel survey can't be 3 years old and use the data. It has to be 2 years old or less, which we do not have. And then you can use the system-wide measure using travel volumes. You can take travel data and use that to kind of estimate the non-SOV. For these measures, the state and AMATS sat down and talked about it and decided that using the ACS, the American Community Survey data, would be the easiest for us to do. So basically, you go into the ACS, pull the data for the years that you want, and you get the amount of single occupancy vehicle users, So whatever percentage that is, subtract it from 100%, and that gives you the non-SOV number for your area. So pretty easy compared to the last measure. As you can see from the DOT's memo, and looking back, we extracted data from 2010 through 2020. And the non-SOV amount is ranged from 24.4% to 26.2%. The 26.2 is higher than previous years, but that was during COVID. So that was kind of one of our factors when we were talking about what our percentage amount should be. And we set kind of moderate targets for 24 and 26, the years that we have to. They are increasing because part of our discussion was recognizing the fact that AMATS is kind of heading in the direction to really start pushing the non-SOV percentages higher than they have been in the past. And you may ask kind of how we do that. That is working with transit to provide things like, correct me if I'm wrong, but micro transit options. So that you can be like car ride or van pool, share ride, and other options like that. Please note that this non-SOV target doesn't really account for non-motorized users as a percentage of your system. So this is not a be-all, end-all. It is one piece of the overall performance system that we have to look at for AMATS. So working with DOT, the measures that we are recommending as AMATS staff is 24.5% in the 2-year target and 25% in the 4-year target. Just like the PHED targets, we can reassess after 2 years to determine if we think these measures need to be adjusted up or down based on data. And that's what we're planning on doing, is coming back after 2 years and let you know where we're at. Okay, that's all I have for that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Would increasing transit use be reflected in the data as a increase in non-single occupancy vehicles? Seems like if we're not capturing non-motor traffic, then we're in the surveys, we're probably not touching the transit users.
Transit would be accounted for in that because it's still a vehicle. That's the thing, is it's still an actual motorized vehicle. The non-motorized users who aren't using a vehicle wouldn't be captured, but transit is captured as part of it through the American Community Survey.
Okay. Are there any implications if we do or don't meet these targets?
For AMATS, no. The state does have to make significant progress towards it, but there's no real impact if they don't meet it. It's just they have to assess how they're going to start meeting and what direction they're going to go in. But right now, there's no penalty assessed on AMATS if we don't meet these targets.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Do we have any questions or comments from members of the public? Online? Finance, it looks like. Okay, what is the will of the committee?
Move to recommend these non-SOV targets to the policy committee for approval.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon, seconded by Acton. Do we have any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay, moving on to action item 5B, the PHED memo. It looks like transit asset management targets. And TAM appendix. I guess there's those 3 items, but I guess the subject is the transit asset management target recommendations. Will you be tackling that, Aaron?
Briefly, and then if others need to talk, they can step in. So we have seen these targets or these categories before for targets. It's not the first time through for AMATS and the Public Transportation Department. So these are the targets that they have to set for asset management. Final rule and regulations all kind of spelled out in the memo there. And so it's rolling stock, equipment, facilities, and infrastructure. These targets are directly from the Public Transportation Department. And part of the requirements is they set their targets and then we as AMATS set targets as well as an NPO with transit providers within our boundary. Staff's recommendation is to review these targets and accept these targets as AMATS's targets as well. Transit manages all these assets, AMATS does not. We assist by helping to provide funding where possible for bus replacement and other options. That's how we're kind of helping to meet these targets. And our recommendation is accept them as is and recommend to the policy committee the same. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Anything else to add from anyone?
Just a quick question. So there's clearly a large drop off from every 22 target and then on out. It's 30% to 11, 38 to 18, 87% to 0. Slow guy, understand why that is.
Maintenance Superintendent Kurt Harris is here, and I'll let him address that question.
Okay, so what we're trying to show, last year when we did our NTD reporting, we calculate what these percentages are showing or how many vehicles in a given category have met or exceed their useful life benchmark. What you're seeing is that currently we've got a high percentage of our vehicles that have met or exceeded the useful life benchmark. And what this screen is showing is basically a recovery plan, if you will, that shows that by 26 and 27, we have a plan if we can maintain it to get ourselves into compliance with our targets as well as having a very reliable fleet. So at different times you see the numbers increase, they might go down, but then come back up. This is representing when a certain number of vehicles in a given category meet that useful life, and the following year, there would be a new acquisition to replace those vehicles.
Okay. So it's like getting new buses in, getting new share ride vans in.
Share ride's not represented
Okay.
on this because that's a contract.
Oh, that's right. It's a contract. Okay.
But yes, on the buses and support.
Okay. Thank you.
And so speaking of the 2023 versus 2022, it looks like new vans, new cutaways, and classified all drop your numbers. But you have more that are meeting useful. Okay, any other questions or comments from?
I just want to ask one question for James. Is there an accepted average age of anything before, there's an expectation that you're going to start replacing?
Yeah, there's the required useful lives for each vehicle type. We didn't, is it in the appendix? We didn't include that, I don't think. But useful lives for vehicles can range anywhere from 12 to 15 years. And so we chose to go with the year model. There's an and or situation where it's mileage or years allowed. And so we have to meet those before we can procure new vehicles.
Okay, thanks. Federal money.
With federal money, yes.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Line from the audience? Okay, what is the will of the committee?
It's up to you.
Move to recommend the target to the targets of the policy committee.
Okay, moved by Ms. Acton, seconded by Mr. Lyon. Do we have any objections? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Item 5C, Rabbit Creek Road project changes. I think it's probably you again to start it off, Aaron.
So I'll start it off and then turn it over for questions. So before you are two memos, one from the Department of Transportation, Project Manager Steve Zepka, who's in the audience for questions today. And then a quick one for me that's kind of giving a condensed version of what's being asked or looked at for today. So the Rabbit Creek Road project is currently in the 2019 to 2022 TIP and is being grandfathered into the 23s and 26 TIP because it is underway. During development, DOT ran into some concerns and are wanting to talk about them. The first is changing the project name from Rabbit Creek Road Reconstruction to Rehabilitation. Mr. Zepka can speak on that when we get to there. The second is changing the project scope to look at left turn accommodations where possible. Just to note, this has already been addressed as part of the 23 through 26 tip. It's just on here because that was part of the original memo from DOT, and I didn't want somebody to think we were ignoring it or missing it. And then the last change is a cost increase to the project. The current cost of the project in the tip is 11.1 million. The estimated project cost now is $35 million. So it's coming before the committees to discuss. The big thing is, with this current cost estimate, does AMAT still want to move forward with this project or not? That's kind of one of the big questions DOT is wanting to get from us. And Mr. Depka is here if you guys have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Do we have any questions from the committee?
Well, I would love to hear why it's such a giant jump in costs.
Is that a question for?
Sure. So, yeah, Steven Zepka, DOT Project Manager, Highway Design. So the honest answer is the $11.1 million number was a very preliminary planning level estimate. And, you know, I think that it was done prior to any mind blowing the project, but my understanding is it was put together very quickly, you know, on a best understanding of what the project was going to entail. During scoping of the project, when I was assigned it, we looked over into what we expected the project was going to need, specifically as far as what the overall width right of ways could be needed for the project. As you see, we're talking about adding, you know, some sort of center lane, you know, left turn lane accommodation, as well as non-motorized facilities. You know, when I talk to people about the project, I basically kind of want to set the stage and expectation. What we're looking at for the project is along the lines of what happened on Abbott Road or on Valley Road. So you can imagine what the, you know, those roads look like before we went through and didn't yet construction projects to where they are after. That's kind of what, you know, Rabbit Creek is going to look like. And so as we went through, we did that kind of, you know, initial scoping of the project. You know, we identified an additional right of way increase that's going to be needed. And you know, this $35 million cost is in line with about what Abbott Road or O'Malley Road costed. So that's what we're looking at the increase to.
Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yes, there's a question, yeah.
Other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Lindeman.
I assume we're fiscally constrained, someone's not in the back with a photocopier and $20 bills. So for $24 million, what isn't getting funded?
Well, in the 23 through 26 tip, it wouldn't be an impact. It would actually be beyond that because it's more of the construction cost is what we're really talking about increasing, and that is beyond our current tip.
So it's 5 years out, 6 years out.
Yeah, and so it's not about really fiscal constraint right now. It's more about next go around, the next tip. And if this project is funded, it may not leave funding available for other projects.
Did we show stuff in 26, 27 fiscally constrained, or are we in the illustrative?
No, yeah, that would be beyond the current year. So we don't really show specific, you know, we'll show like a total dollar, but we don't break it down by phase or anything, and we don't have to fiscally constrain it. But, well, we do in the sense, if we think there's going to be reasonable funding available during that time frame.
Okay.
There is reasonable funding available. However, it means that other things may not be able to be moved in. So that's kind of the discussion, is this or other things.
Do we have any sense of what those other things could be?
Well, some of the things we've heard from the public recently is a 5th and 6th Avenue signalization and lighting project. The policy committee put that in as part of the illustrative category for the tip to replace all the lighting on 5th and 6th Avenue because aging infrastructure. And then there's been input from the public about studies such as an AC corridor study, greenhouse gas study, those kind of things I don't see them really impacted. It's more the larger scale construction projects later down the line that I see being impacted, you know. We have Spinard Road for a pretty large amount going to be coming up. We have Potter Valley or Potter Drive. We have a bunch of construction projects that are going to be coming up this tip and kind of next tip, really. And so it's what impact are we going to have then? I don't have that before me right now to tell you what kind of impact that would be because it's kind of a guessing game at this point.
And what we're doing today is we're just acknowledging the fact that these changes need to be made to what's in the database to define this project. Not necessarily to rack it and stack it.
Well, that would be kind of part of the discussion of, you know, with this cost estimate that is shown here, what would the committee like done? The staff can't make that determination. We need direction from the technical advisory committee and ultimate decision by the policy committee.
Okay. Other questions from the committee?
So, question, so I know that like the overall cost is this 35 million. We have a kind of fine tuning what the construction, because I know the rest of it can probably fit in with our regular allocation, but let's say our allocation is around 30 million. It's not a $30 million construction hit or?
No, so that 35 is total project
Yeah.
cost, so that's designed right away.
Yeah.
Construction is in the ballpark of, 25 million of that total amount. Some of the big stuff that we don't know right now, like I said, is what that typical section is gonna look like. There's still ongoing conversations that need to occur about, whether we're doing turn pockets or a full, left turn lane through the center. There's ongoing conversations that need to occur about whether the non-motorized plan has it identified as a separated bikeway, but there's also been discussions where individuals want a separated or shared use pathway off to the side. And so, the overall footprint of the roadway is really going to impact what that construction cost is. And we won't know that until we get into design.
Kind of related to that, some of the project changes look like they provide more flexibility,
Yes.
whereas before it said reconstruct with a center turn lane and non-motorized improvements, whereas the change that's already been incorporated into the tip is we'll look at left turn accommodations where possible and non-motorized improvements where possible, which is more of the flexibility.
Exactly. And that kind of ties into the request to change from a reconstruction or a 4R project down to a rehabilitation or 3R. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with 3R and 4R, but generally the way I describe it is that 4R is, you are going to build everything out to meet all standards within, the Green Book and pre-construction manual. A 3R allows you to take the existing facility and expand where you can, or to meet those standards where you can. But if the existing facility doesn't have a deficiency, you have more allowance to maintain what is out there. And so by making the change down to a rehabilitation project, it gives us more flexibility to limit the footprint, to narrow things down a little bit, and hopefully reduce the overall payment.
And so if it would have stayed at a 4R, the cost would have been even more.
It's hard to say exactly, definitively yes or no would be more or less, but generally speaking, yeah, if it's a 4R, you can expect the cost would be.
So we actually spell out kind of right away cost in 2025. Are we anticipating the right of way cost is going to go above what we currently show in the tip?
No, to the best of our knowledge right now, that right of way cost, should be the conservative, realistic value. But we think the big unknown with the right of way cost is there's one point in the road where there are two parcels where the dwellings are on the close side. So there, we've got a pinch point, and depending what we find for a design solution, there may be a full acquisition that's required or not required. Again, with the desire to go down to rehabilitation, the desire is that we don't have to do any kind of full acquisition. But so that the right of way cost is really dependent upon what we find through our design.
I have a question. So, and it may have to do with the pinch point, maybe not, but the caveat or the wiggle room on the non-motorized improvement that is in the new description. How does that how do you balance that? How will that be balanced against the clear stated needs or the desires of the community to have those non-motorized facilities up there? And what are the criteria? Early on, I realize it's a long way in advance, Steve, but how do you make those determinations when you have this language in here that allows the project team to have that latitude?
So this project, being within AMAN's, and Sean, will correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it's anticipated to go through the CSS process. And so through that process, we would likely determine.
Okay, other questions or comments from the committee?
Hello?
I think it's time to see if there's any questions or comments from the public.
Yes, I have some. This is Diane Holmes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Dan. You've got 3 minutes.
I'm on the board of Rabbit Creek Community Council, and since our co-chairs are off hiking in Europe, I guess I'm the one to bring up a few questions. We have commented for years on this project, and we have always said that the center lanes, a center lane should not be a center lane. And I believe you have changed this to be intermittent left turn lanes. And I see that you have in the project description where possible. And there are only a few places between the bottom of the hill and Golden View where that they would be needed. But I have to remind you, if you haven't been on the road lately, that really steep hills and blind curves, and we need to keep the traffic speed down. So central lane certainly is not a very good idea. And also I see on the project summary that pedestrian facilities where possible is included, but actually they need to be here all the way because children cannot walk to school, and they have rehabbed, or I don't know the correct word, but not very many years ago they resurfaced it, I think twice, and in neither case were any pedestrian facilities included, and this is very much needed. And I think that may be why you don't want to put in pedestrian paths just all the way, where you put in this little caveat where possible, is because there's some rules about steepness of pedestrian pathways in code somewhere, maybe federal highway code. But I had a DOT engineer who lived next door, and he mentioned that the very steep bottom hill could not have a pathway, or at least you can't call it that, or you can't pave it. But call it something else, don't pave it, but do put it in. It's got to be all the way. And I think that not having the intersection at Golden View as part of this, and of course that's a huge amount of money, just huge, but it's kind of disingenuous to fix the bottom part from Golden View down to the highway and not fix this very important intersection. And the hillside intersection study that was done some years ago on 19 intersections on the hillside, Golden View and Rabbit Creek was the one that needed it most. So that has to be in there at some point in some fashion. And I did catch that you were saying that if this road is done, then other roads wouldn't get done. However, I think that the Scooter or 92nd Avenue project, yeah, if you don't do that, then I think you'll have some money left over. So take out the words where possible on the pedestrian paths, and I hope you understand that we do not need left turn, the full center lane, just intermittent left turn lanes.
Great. Thank you for your comment, Dan. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to come comment. Do we have additional public comments? Sounds like.
Nancy Peace has her hand raised.
Okay, do we want to go, I guess, let's go with Nancy and then we'll come to you, Sean, afterwards, if that's all right.
Thank
Okay, Nancy,
you.
go ahead.
I'll echo what Ms. Holmes just said regarding non-motorized facilities. Remove the caveat of where possible. And I would also ask this committee to add the words require or require separated non-motorized facilities. It was stated that this will be a $35 million project that will look like O'Malley Road. It seems unreal that it would not be multimodal. And in the case of the speeds of traffic and the volumes of traffic, separation for the non-motorized users is the only safe way to do that. So I don't see this as a where possible. This project will be built to last for 20 or 30 years. And if you're spending 35 million, it needs to be done completely for all users. Second, I'm wondering why the TAC is asked to make this $24 million decision in just 15 or 20 minutes, especially with only a quick and incomplete verbal summary of what the project might or might not include, and a quick and incomplete verbal summary of the opportunity costs. There's just very casual mention of A Street and C Street. Well, what are the volumes of traffic? What are the land use impacts of building there instead of building this project? I mean, I know this project is needed. I would use this project, but in terms of the city putting its money where the most people can use it and it has the best impacts on land use, this TAC should be able to look at the full options. And as Ms. Holmes mentioned, 92nd Avenue underpass would surely be less important than this project or A Street, C Street. I don't know how they all rank out, but my point is you're being asked to make this decision and you're just giving this sort of verbal off the top of people's heads assessment of what the opportunity costs are and what the facilities are. That doesn't seem like you tapping into your technical expertise. It doesn't seem as if you're being asked to give a second opinion, but rather just to second their idea, to be an echo chamber. So I hope that you might take a little extra time on this one and projects of this magnitude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Let's go with John.
Oh, yeah, Sean Holland, I just had the question, kind of a follow up to Ms. Holmes there, but where possible is that intended to be where possible with that $35 billion, or is there anything else that would make that impossible? It seems like we have right way purchase in there. There might be.
One more issue.
I think we'll dive into some additional questions here after we get through all the public comments. Any other public comments? Let's go with Bart.
Bart Rudolph, the Transit. Just a couple of questions. I'm assuming when this project was scored, there were some assumptions that the pathway would be there and the turn lane would use safety. So I'm wondering what the revised scoring would show to see if it would take this project out of the TIP and another project in its place based on the assumptions that were made on the scope at the time. And then for DOT, if AMAS doesn't fund this project, recognizing that AMAS is just one funding source, what would DOT's plan be for this road?
Okay, thank you, Bart. So are there any other public comments or questions? See anything else online? Okay, I think that there have been some really important questions raised. Is the process that we can then ask for the feedback or those questions to be answered?
Yeah, I guess it wasn't clear from some of the comments from the public, but it's not staff asking you to echo anything. It's asking for you guys to decide what you would like to do with this project. Do you want more information? Do you want to move forward? We need some direction from you all on what to do regarding this, because we were just sent this memo saying, hey, we have a cost increase. what does AMATS want to do about it? So we're trying to bring it through the process. So if you guys need more information, more time, we would need to know that and we can try and gather the data and bring it back to you.
Here are some of the questions that I heard, and maybe we could go through some of these, and if there does need to be more time to answer them, then we can back to our next meeting to have more information, but one of them was the question of the additional funding. It's a lot of additional funding, right? And if it is envisioned that it's gonna have the multi-use path or the pedestrian facilities, with that funding, that seems to make sense that you need that additional funding, but if you're not gonna do, so I guess the where feasible, but yet huge funding increase, a little bit, I guess a question of that, you know, is the 35 allowing it to have the full pedestrian facilities along the whole stretch?
The short answer is yes, the 35 million is with the anticipation that we are, providing all those facilities. The where possible kind of falls in line with that caveat of this rehabilitation where we may find some constraint where we need to, find another alternative. But the 35 million, is based on, a blowout of the road to, a two-way left turn lane. Or let me clarify, we are gonna do a traffic impact analysis to understand what kind of accommodations for turning movements we need to do. So we don't know whether it's left turn pockets or two-way left turn lane or some other means right now. But the cost that we have there is kind of assuming, the largest footprint. And then, but yes, so the largest footprint, including wherever it is for vehicular traffic as well as non-motorized facilities.
And then the other question is, if it doesn't get funded with the TIP, would there be, I know we've had discussions before that there's AMATS funding and there's DOT funding, and a DOT project versus an AMATS project where the STIP and the TIP, and so kind of going to the question of funding, if it's not included in the TIP and the AMATS, what is the?
I don't have an answer to that
I
question.
should probably answer that. But so, this could be a project that we would propose as a DOT funded project. Right now, we don't have scoring criteria for modernization and expansion projects, which would be what this would fall under. Right now, we're focusing more on state of good repair, repairing, and maintaining what we have. And so the timing for getting that project nominated, scored, included into our STIP is on.
And it would continue to be, ranked against all projects in the state and all other communities within the central region and the Anchorage area may want their projects nominated as well.
And one of the other questions was the pedestrian facilities having steepness, ADA challenges. Have you done any analysis looking at that? Is that part of what's at play here?
We haven't looked into it yet. Again, we're just kicking the project off. Generally speaking, pathway grades are allowed to match the roadway grade, much below the roadway grade. And so, if the roadway grade, is steep for a certain area, the pathway can match that grade.
Perfect. So those are the questions that I heard. Did I miss anything?
I just wanted to circle back to Bart's question about the re-ranking and scoring.
Oh,
What
that's
the
right.
That looks like. I heard the same thought initially, was what does that do to me? Does it need to be re-ranked or scored, or should it be?
No, unless they change, I just looked back, unless it is confirmed that non-motorized facilities will not be included, it wouldn't need to be ranked because it's under the assumption that 35 million will include non-motorized facilities, which was part of the original discussion. So if at some point they came and said, we're just not going to be able to do it for whatever reason, then we would probably need to rescore it and see how it scores. But I will point out, it was scored using different scoring than what we currently have available. So it is not easy to be able to do a comparison. So we'd have to do a rescoring of the original project with the new criteria, a scoring of it without the non-motorized with the new criteria, and see kind of, it would be, we could do it, but I don't know how clear it would be.
Well, the non-motorized, for
right now is qualified as where possible. So if 25% of it has not motorized, 75% doesn't, what is that?
Our criteria is
They
not,
get 20, they get 25% of their score and it's never built a project.
I guess that would be up to the committees to decide. Our criteria does not spell it out with this project only has 5% non-motorized facility compared to the rest of it. I think it's recognized that you're gonna do it all. Unless something massive happens. And that's part of why we're bringing this forward is to start initiating this discussion about this project and not just drop it in on everyone, say, hey, this increased threefold, let's do it and move forward. It's, okay, what do we need to look at?
Another question as to whether the Golden View intersection redesign was considered as part of that upgrade.
No, it was not included in the original scoring. It was recognized that that is a separate project with a really expensive price tag on its own. And adding that to this would be a pretty significant increase in cost.
Okay, so other questions? Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Zepke, so what stage are you at in the development of the project?
So right now, we're working on the environmental document. So this project just got funding approximately a month ago, 6 weeks ago. So we are very early on at this point. We haven't even obtained survey information for everything that's out there yet. We're basing our estimates on as-built and kind of anecdotal knowledge, but we're very preliminary.
Couple of questions, Brad. What are the impacts? What would be the impacts if we decided today to defer this decision to the meeting in October?
As an impacts of project delivery?
Yeah.
At this point, I can't foresee any impacts that would slow us down.
And from an AMAT's point of view, Aaron?
I don't see any impacts to it.
My next question is, perhaps this came to, I missed a meeting, the last one, perhaps this came before the committee before, it has not. So based on that, it does seem like a very significant change on short notice. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, does the committee ever have work sessions, or is this considered a work session for the committee to discuss and ask for more information?
We can have a work session if need be, but I think there's already been a number of questions raised here. It'd be good to do it now, just because of timing. We have a work session coming up soon for vision eval. October is going to have another work session on the MTP. So just kind of keep that in mind. We do have already multiple work sessions, but we can easily, if the committee would like to have a work session in like a week or two, whatever time frame you want, I can send out a doodle poll and get that together and schedule a work session. We would just need to make sure everyone, what questions do you want to ask? So that the project team could be prepared to help either respond or whatever.
And I think I heard you say that we could also do that here. We could work in this discussion to come up with the questions, ask those questions, and then ideally have the answers for the October meeting.
You can, yes, you can set a timeline. If you're like, we want it November, October, whatever you guys want, you can say, please come back to us and we'll work with the project team to try and get the information together when they need it.
So can I just like a re-clarification? What I thought was supposed to happen and what I'm hearing is supposed to happen. Because when I read the memo from the state, and the action requested is to change the project name, change the project scope, and change project cost. So basically, that's update the database to what is now more realistically a definition of the project. Period. Not make a value judgment on where it racks and stacks with anything. Just know that if we're going to talk about this Rabbit Creek thing going forward, it needs to be called the Rabbit Creek Road Rehabilitation. It's going to include this and it's going to cost us. But in the process of, if we agree to make those changes, there's a second and third order consequence that comes with it, which is now project that was originally in there got scored a different way than this has to be scored. There's some work has to get done to reconsider this and where it fits. Is that about right?
Yes, I think, not really, because, since there's no real change to the project, aside from adding the where possible, but, the cost estimate we have here is including non-motorized. If a decision was made to remove the non-motorized, then we would have to rescore it and reconsider it. Really, the intent for this was to bring this forward to get the committees to discuss it and say, do you want to move forward on this? Do you have questions? Do you want to wait? What do you want to do with this? Because it's relatively new for us to get this magnitude of a cost increase on a project kind of this early in the process. So we really wanted to get the discussion going on what to do.
Fair enough, then I'm inclined to agree with Ken.
So. What happens to me? For the sake of moving this along. I'm going in so that we can actually have something to do. I'm going to move that we go ahead and make all these adjustments. But I'm going to modify, have to strike the word possible, because in fact, if they start pulling pieces of non-motorized out, then it's gonna have to get restored. So I'm gonna move that, someone can second it, and then we can trade checkers after that.
Which where possible, just the
Remove
non-motorized
the
one?
where, the non-motorized where possible.
Leave it in for the turn lane.
That's the way it's currently scored, so unless they want to just resubmit the whole damn thing with whatever they want to change, I don't see how we can realistically do it. I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Lindenman, second by Mr. Lyon to, and what I'm hearing is accept the name change,
Yeah, except,
accept the total cost, and have the non-motorized not have it where possible, but that
stays in because that's part of the existing.
that's how it's.
In the scope, in the scope.
And I would say further, at least as far as the lead up to the discussion, to the project manager's point, this is not inconsistent with what has happened with the last two of these, so.
Which include.
Right, I don't like the drastic change in cost estimates, but I recognize those happen. But, what we're seeing seems to be fairly consistent with the last two. I think there's a lot of details that have to get worked out to design as far as what it ultimately looks like. But I have some concerns over what may not get done elsewhere to fit this in the budget once we reach that shorter time frame. But I think we at least need to move it along far enough so that we actually have all the information in front of us and then decide how important it is relative to whether it's Scooter Avenue, A Street, C Street, XYZ Street, whatever comes up.
Okay, so now that we have the motion, it's been moved, we can have additional discussion, right, about that.
Yes.
Mr. Stitch.
Does this not trigger the requirement for an amendment since they?
So we wouldn't make this change right now, just thank you for bringing that up. This would be done with the next amendment would be TIP. Because we are in the process right now of getting the TIP approved through or getting it reviewed by the interagency consultation process and getting it to DOT, FHWA, FTA for approval and done. I would recommend this be addressed with amendment number 1, that we're going to be starting as soon as the TIP is approved, and we have a bunch of other changes as well. And that be looked at there instead of stopping the TIP approval to redo all of this and go through everything again.
That was my other, go ahead.
A couple of thoughts. One is, the increase in the amount is something that's in the next tip, because most of that increase is the construction. That's what we're talking about. So, if this comes with the next amendment or even after that, I'm not as worried about it because I know that dollar figure is something that's not shown up for a while. And knowing that O'Malley Road was in the program when I started in 2003, these big ones take a while. So I'm fine deferring this decision on this to the next meeting because there's a lot to chew on. I will say I agree 100% with the removing where possible from the non-motorized improvements because since I've been here, we build roads, we put non-motorized improvements on it. So I don't want to include where possible because this has to be seen as that's how it's scoped and that's how we build our roads. We include non-motorized improvements we let the designers come up with what makes the most sense, but those were included. So I guess I was kind of seconding it for purpose of discussion. I'm fine if we delay this to the next meeting because there's a lot to chew on and have a work session, but I think we are all knowing that this is it's a big change. It's a huge dollar figure change. I understand, you know, that's a planning level estimate and that's one of the biggest planning level estimate changes I've seen in my time in advance, but I understand your thoughts.
Defer, don't we need to vote on the current amendment and then have a amendment?
Well, again, I was seconding it so we can discuss it. And if we discuss it here for a while and we decide, all right, let's pull it back and do this at the next meeting. That's it.
I don't know if that's a table or a delay.
Yeah.
So if we did table it for the next time, what additional things do we want to know?
I think sorry, go ahead, John.
Sure. As part of the discussion about the removals where possible, so can we ask a couple questions?
Sure.
So, do we have any concerns understanding the community's desire for non-motorized facilities along the entire corridor? That we would absolutely not be able to provide those facilities along the entire corridor at all expense.
At this point, I don't know anything about the project that would prevent us from providing non-motorized facilities along the length of it.
What kind of adjustments to non-motorized facilities does the department sometimes use in order to avoid rather large impacts? You know, even when there's a desire for a separated facility, sometimes there's things adjacent to the roadway that cause you to have to make the changes to the typical.
Yeah, so certainly like, for example, if we were looking at the separated pathway, and there were, like I mentioned a pinch point where we've got, two dwellings that are close to, the center line of the road, or they're on the narrow portions of their right of way. We would look at bringing that pathway, up to and adjacent to the roadway, to kind of narrow in and hourglass through the area. We can look at options. One of the things that we haven't discussed about this road at all is the topography around. I mean, it is on the side of the hill. And so, one of the biggest impacts to right of ways are cut and fill slopes, how far out those embankments are going to go. And so we can look at options as far as using retaining walls or pedestrian railing or something to narrow in our footprint to avoid some of those, some of those impacts.
Hearing that, we don't have any concerns with removal of the where possible.
And the cost estimate, the additional cost estimate accounts for all of those potential.
Within reason at a planning level.
They're planning level.
Yeah, we're right there.
It's not gonna be a loss.
So it
No.
could be a little, it could be less, could be more.
Right.
It's not like you're gonna try to spend it, it's that
Exactly.
you wanna have a reasonable, so you wanna be able to move forward knowing, okay, at least the committees at EMAS support really what it's gonna take to make this what we have scope here.
Yes.
Well, it's semantics, but what's the difference between will include non-motorized improvements where possible and includes non-motorized improvements? It doesn't say will include separated pathway the entire length of the project. It says includes non-motorized improvements. The designers are gonna come up with, gosh, there's a pinch point there, so we have to move in for a little bit or whatever, We're still gonna have non-motorized improvements there. That's how we build those. That's how AMAS plans for roads.
Yeah, and I mean, as a cyclist who bikes in, you could have 90% of the road with improvements, and the 10% you don't have could basically nullify the other 90%. So I think I'm supportive of the approach if we take the whereas out, because whereas like a turn lane, yeah, you don't have places to turn the entire lane, so the whereas makes more sense there than it does for the non-motorized. So are we, I guess, should we vote on the motion? Or have a discussion? I mean, it sounds like one thing is either we postpone it for a month, maybe there's gonna be new things that we learn, or we vote on it.
I think we need to vote. I think there's a motion and a second on the table. So I think we need to vote up or down on that and then back to the discussion on whether to postpone or not. I believe that's Robert's rule.
Is that how we?
Yeah, you can do that, or you can do a friendly amendment or something like that, but to keep it clean, I would recommend make a vote on this and then from there decide what you guys are doing.
Okay.
So remind me what the motion is with Brian's recommendation.
Yep. Brian made the motion to accept all the changes except taking out the where possible for the non-motorized. So I think that item 2 were the last where possible. So it's, a change in the cost. So I guess, do we do, if there's any objections, or do we do
You can ask if there are any objections, if are, then you can do a roll call and get the numbers there and go from there.
okay, are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, so we do have a yes, let's do the roll call. Did I lead that, or do you lead this? How do we?
You can lead it and then just not count yourself unless there's a tie.
Okay, sounds good. So, Mr. Baskey?
Yes.
Mr. Leamy?
Yes.
Mr. Stucci?
No. Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Bourne?
Yes.
Acton? Yes. Mr. Lyon?
Yes.
Looks like I don't need to vote, right? Because okay, so looks like the will of the committee is to propose these changes to the policy committee with the modification. Okay. Anything else on that one, or that? There's this.
That works. I'm just making notes.
Yeah, I guess just a clarifying question. So just from my enjoyable experience sitting in the assembly, we voted on amendment. We vote, and I thought, maybe I misunderstood. I thought we voted to adopt the new language. Accept the language in the other 2 items and adopt the new language for where possible.
We recommended the policy committee adopt it. Right. We can't make a change.
Right.
We recommend the policy committee make a change.
Right, so I guess I'm still confused. So we voted on recommending change language. Did we also vote to forward this to the policy committee?
That's part of it.
Yeah. I think
Okay, was that how your amendment?
it was a
Okay,
combined motion, I think.
Okay.
Or
That's what will happen. is
And to
we'll
be
forward it
frank,
policy.
part of the reason that I don't know what the hell else we're gonna learn in 30 days. So if we can delay it 30 days, just for something to do 30 days from now, we can move it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's move on then.
Yeah.
We don't have too many roll calls, so that was, Move on from there to, a little bit. So, okay,
about 10 small.
okay, action item 5D, Seward Highway Diamond to Valley, and second undercrossing.
I'll go in this and then this is, hopefully I've captured everything on this because there was a lot of discussion on this at the policy committee. So the 23 through 26 tip was before the policy committee last month, and an item came up for discussion to remove the Seward Highway Diamond Boulevard to O'Malley Road, 92nd Avenue undercrossing, the whole project from the tip. Part of this came about, public comment is concerned about the undercrossing being a vehicular focused undercrossing and the impacts it may have in the surrounding areas. And then the assembly passed a resolution that kind of echoed some of those concerns. You'll see in the letter I drafted up what those whereas concerns were. And you can read through those. So after discussion with the policy committee, they ultimately decided to send this action, something about this project, to the technical advisory committee, asking the technical advisory committee to work with DOT to evaluate the feasibility and impacts of only including a non-motorized underpass at 92nd Avenue and Scooter and not having a vehicular underpass for the Seward Highway Diamond Boulevard to O'Malley Road project. Additionally, the TAC has requested to update the PC by November on the status of this effort. And I will just clarify, since there may have been some confusion, the policy committee did not ask to have a decision reached by the technical advisory committee, just an update on where they are at in this whole process in November. So, trying to figure out what to do with this, I have recommended to the technical advisory committee that a memo be sent to the DOT NPF project manager that outlines the concerns heard from the assembly, from the public, that are outlined in the resolution from the assembly, and kind of takes the exact quote from the policy committee of what they would like to see evaluated. Send that memo to the project manager and have the project manager come at the November TAC meeting to provide feedback on this and have a discussion with the technical advisory committee. The reason waiting until November is to give time for the project manager to actually look at what's being asked and try and get together the information to provide it to the technical advisory committee. Doing that in like a few weeks' time, they may need some more time to be able to do that. So I wanted to give them as much time as possible. The technical advisory committee, of course, can do whatever they would like with this. If you don't want a memo and you want something else, let me know. I'm just trying to make this, facilitate this happening and have this discussion. So.
Okay, any questions? You done? Okay, any questions?
DOT was at that policy committee, so I think they're probably at least casually aware of what has been asked. Can we ask DOT if they put any thought into this that they would like to share with us at this time, so we can decide whether a memo is necessary or if we need a work session or something else?
Maybe part of that question is the November versus October. Who's the right person at DOT to ask that to?
You want me to fill this one back?
So obviously DOT has been paying attention to the act by the assembly, also participated in a number of folks in attendance at the policy meeting, witnessing that discussion. I think the memo that's drafted here by staff gives DOT the opportunity to show the benefits of the project and all the different aspects of it that hopefully show.
Explain how you got to where you are with the project.
And there's a long history with this project too. And the memo speaks to the 20-year history of this. Continue to evaluate things as we go along through that 20-year period. But so I think this opportunity gives us time to dig into some of the details here. Feasibility of just a bike and ped crossing there as opposed to vehicular. It's not something that we evaluated as part of the project scope on this one. Bike and ped facilities are included as the 92nd corridor. This project.
So I guess the root of my concern is we have a meeting now. We vote to send you a memo. We get that, frankly, happen to have already read because you're on the same committee. So we formally send you a memo. Does that mean we get a presentation in October? Because if we've got to get back to them by November, my fear is if we spend 30 days to just put paper back and forth across the desk, we're not going to be very far.
So the department had looked at a crossing, so the memo here specifically states for an undercrossing, underpass, and that wasn't looked at. There may be some unintended consequences that people might not be aware of for something like that. So especially with the high water table and drastic grade differences between the west side and the east side. An overpass was looked at one point in time. And so, I think a crossing is more probably in the spirit of what they're intending. We're trying to pick our words. If there is an ask to look at an underpass specifically, then the department will probably be going and pointing out why that would be phenomenally expensive and probably not the public or, you know, the policy committee had intended.
So you're advocating changing some of the language in the memo to get, take some of the shackles off for you to be able to really look at alternatives? To state it another way.
I mean, we've already looked at it in the overpass. So, I mean, we could discuss here, you know, what the repercussions of an underpass are without having to go through, you know, a lot of other things. Given I was the previous project manager on the project, I'm certainly familiar with a lot of the implications.
Was the proposed scooters, soon to be named something else that I can't remember now, Academy Connection, was that road originally going to go under the highway or over?
Under.
Yeah, you're stating that there's a bunch of unintended consequences and concerns associated with high water tables and so forth that didn't exist with that, but will exist with the pad crossing. Of the same nature.
Sure. So, you know, putting in an underpass, you would potentially have to raise both the frontage road and the off ramps, which you would not have to do if you wanted to go underneath the frontage road on the east side, as well as the off ramps on the west side. And so, connecting back into local road systems, existing driveways, any number of things, you know, is you have to raise, I think the highway itself was raised 15 feet to make the undercrossing for the, you know, pedestrian, bicycle and vehicle, you know, footage.
And how much is it gonna be raised to do the whole Monty road?
That was 15. And so you'd have to raise the frontage roads. The frontage roads were all being dropped
Drop to meet the.
about
Right.
about 8 feet, but they were just above the water table. And so you'd have to raise the frontage roads over top of the pedestrian undercrossing, or you're gonna have big block, high-speed crossings for pedestrians and bicyclists across your frontage road.
I understand that, but I'm mathematically speaking, you were looking at probably 70-80 foot span for the highway going over what would be Bandra Avenue, Academy Drive, whatever it was, right?
You know, including layback and all the rest of it, you're pushing 130.
Yeah, so 120, 130, so you've got 8/10 of beams for that width plus 16/6 clear versus a guy on a bicycle.
I think it sounds like what Sean's saying. For the pedestrian undercross, they would want it to be grade separated from the front road too.
Unless the direction or the desire from the community is to put it only under the highway. And then you'd have to continue to lower the frontage roads to get your self down as low as possible, and you would have to raise the off ramp on the west side another 15 feet, you know, over what it is out there to make room. Because you're at grade on the west side is
higher, right?
On the west side is already just above the water table. There's already, you know, ponds and adjacent properties.
Well, and my point is, I agree, the front roads definitely have to go over, but top of pavement to top of pavement for a road through there is gonna be significantly more than top of bike path to top of pavement for a road. And that's where I'm having a hard time with 15 feet. Other numbers.
Instead of 15 feet, you might be down to 10 feet.
Right.
Of grade raise on the highway, just, you know,
But I'm
rough
dealing,
numbers off the top.
but I'm also dealing with a 25, 30 foot span, 80, 100 foot span, which is kind of just constructed now.
Right. There's more implications than meets the eye. You can't just put in a pedestrian undercrossing and expect that the existing academy on the east side stays the same. You're still gotta drop it to make room for it or raise it up and then have little to no access to some of the adjacent. You know, retaining walls to retain all of that, so that way you're not impacting the neighboring properties more than you already are. Drainage impacts by dumping water from the adjacent properties. I mean, it's extensive. It's not just a, you know, remove the facility that's there and then put in a pedestrian crossing.
Agreed, but I guess my concern is, you know, again, it would be my desire to give the department a little bit more free space to come up with options. And my concern is you're sort of predisposed into sending the feds over top without recognizing that, you know, going under, I think you're correct, is probably more expensive, but from a non-motorized perspective, it may be preferred, and we just need to fully understand what all the options are, what the costs associated with those options are, before we're able to make a realistic recommendation.
And if that's the case, then we'll need to.
I'd like to offer a motion just for discussion, and if we don't want to second
We still
this.
need public comment,
No, I'm sorry.
so we're not quite ready.
Okay, so well, let me ask you a question. So if we were to change the language to a grade separated crossing as opposed to an underpass, that would address some of your concerns, Mr. Baskey, at least for opening up the constraints that are faced by using the words underpass.
I mean, to be honest, we probably would have done it anyways, because that is likely the spirit of the policy committee, you know, as opposed to, you know, just providing.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Comments from the committee? Questions? Okay, let's move to public questions. Are there any members of the public who would?
Actually, I do have a comment.
Okay, we'll wait on the public and go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, so also part of the concern I heard voiced at the policy committee meeting 2 weeks ago was that they didn't want that additional traffic from the underpass going through the current neighborhood development, housing development, just south of Academy Vanguard. So yeah, it seems like preferred option is a pedestrian only access way.
Is
But
kind of the
whatever needs
question
to be.
that when DOT comes back with information, they should also have information about the impacts that it would have for traffic. Is that kind of where you're going on with that question? Or with that comment?
I think what I'm asking for is an opportunity to understand what designs DOT is considering that fulfills the intent of the motion that was raised 2 weeks ago. I think we need to review the potential the potential options. Have a recommendation for the policy.
So kind of trying to interpret that, was the intent when you would come back to us to bring an explanation of why you have the proposal, you probably have kind of that already underway. Maybe like what Mr. Miniman asked, show us what the implications of doing what the assembly's asking. And then including what the traffic implications might be. Is that a reasonable?
I can speak to this and let me ask if you correct me where I step on my toes here, or my foot in my mouth. So when we're asked to remove the vehicular connection there, that was part of the analysis and purpose and need of the project that was evaluated as we were looking at the scope of this project. As we went through, we're looking at diverging diamond there at O'Malley, and we also evaluated that at the diamond intersection. Looking at this connection, it relieved a little bit of the congestion there. I think we've updated that with NTP traffic numbers as well. So
we would be sharing that information. This is what we think the traffic's gonna be there. We're looking at a 2-lane facility, scooter 92nd. So this isn't posed as a massive thoroughfare. It would be a multimodal connection there that would hopefully be accommodating to all users, as opposed to the Diamond big Seward crossing, which I think there's room for movement there.
So the one like 76 is sort of what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, it's a single lane roundabout for most of the legs with, you know, a couple multi-lane portions depending on the amount of traffic. But then immediately after that, you're down to 2 lanes. Right. East and west, on the municipality.
Well, I mean, yeah, that makes sense versus, you know, something that you would expect more like a Diamond.
Okay, let's move, any more, I guess, questions, comments from the committee? Or move to public? Okay, let's move over to the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Anyone's with their hands raised? Are there any? Nancy would like to comment? Okay, go ahead, Nancy. Are you on the call? Okay, she has her hand raised, but she's on mute. You're on mute, Nancy, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Sorry about that. I'm really encouraged to hear members of the committee wanting to open up the discussion and look at the range of possibilities. I would also ask that you continue the discussion with regard to the impacts of the land use, on the land use in the low-income neighborhoods on both sides of the highway. And it also, there's a, you know, a category of other bigger picture questions. This project is 30 million for the underpass plus 18.7 million for Vanguard Academy. And we just saw what has happened to the DOT cost estimates on O'Malley Road and now Rabbit Creek Road. So who knows? This might be a 70 million or an $80 million project. What are the you know, the options for that money if this project is not really needed? So I'm asking you 2 things. One is to dig into the assumptions and the need for a road connection under the Seward Highway here, and also the cost, opportunity costs. So those are 2 specific questions. In terms of the need, does DOT and AMATS assume that current rates of single occupant vehicle driving and current rates of mode share will continue until 2040 or 2050? Because I don't think that's what the community is asking for, and I don't think that's what the feds are asking for. And then please look at induced traffic, induced vehicle traffic. You know, when you build a attractive new road, more people take more vehicle trips. And also please look at the induced demand for parking. The whole Diamond area, when you look at it on Google Earth, it's a sea of parking. Even buildings like Walmart look as if they're floating in a sea of parking. So please make this conversation a sort of a demonstration into how you're thinking really broadly. What are the opportunity costs? What are the induced vehicle demands? What direction are we going with our investments? So thank you. Oh, and one more thing. I heard that PC wants you to work with DOT. I'm hoping they'll at least bring in the DOT Active Transportation Coordinator, who's based in Juneau. And I'm hoping you'll bring in some other perspectives as well. I think it was Sean who said at the outset of this discussion, DOT will have a chance to show you the benefits of the project and its 20-year history. Well, we want some other perspectives. I think that's what the community is asking for, and that's what the PC is asking for. So I hope you'll bring in some other perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I see that we have a few other, just to get in order, I guess next is Assembly Member Volland. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, your 3 minutes.
Great. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to hear. It just kind of sounds muffled on your end, but so I hope you can hear me clearly. I really appreciate your consideration of this project, and want to reiterate that I feel strongly that this project, as it currently stands, is a vehicle underpass. $30 million for the underpass, $18 million for the Vanguard Academy components is not the highest and best use of this public money. This is not a priority for the community, and that was strongly demonstrated by the resolution passed by the Assembly as a body in support of right-sizing this project. We would like to see instead a pedestrian or multimodal, non-motorized underpass. And although I recognize that there are perhaps some challenges to that, and sounds like those are being brought forward here, you know, we really have to consider the cost component and the priorities of the community. And I would just really like to keep that perspective going forward as the technical advisory committee considers this. Let's think about the land use. Let's think about the ball fields that are there, that are cherished by the community. What do we want to see going forward? So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Brad, before we move on, I just want to, we got a comment that the audio from individuals in the room is a little muffled. So as you're speaking, please speak up and towards the microphone so members of the public can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, so next on the public, it looks like John Littleton. Go ahead.
Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, I come at this a number of ways, member of the community council here, and I live on the east side of this project, not in Patriot Park, but further east, and have a business in the Diamond Center on the west side. So I know this area very well. And since you've, I think it is time to take another look at this, and I appreciate your heading that way. Since the analysis on this was done, we've busted Independence through to O'Malley, which has changed traffic patterns in Independence Park dramatically. Elmore has been extended from Tudor Abbott, which also draws traffic that way. We've got growth in the Huffman and the Abbott town centers, which makes far less need to drive to the Diamond Center area. And then your plans for the diverging Diamond at O'Malley will pull a lot of car traffic that way. And most dramatically, the congestion in this area was dropped considerably when Takanu Mall opened up. So there are huge factors that have changed the dynamic at that Old Seward Highway, New Seward Highway, and Diamond and Abbott intersection. One of the things I think Assemblyman Volan brought them up, which is the opportunity costs and the impacts, and there's already a lot of cut-through traffic through Patriot Park, and this project will increase it. I mean, we're talking, Academy's got, something on the order of 1,000 car trips per day now, but that is, last I saw was 10,000 trips per day, and I've heard more recently there's surprising estimate that it increased to 14,000, which with this project drops to a stop sign. And even after the city's project, the traffic will filter through Patriot Park to go to the Diamond, to the Fred Meyer's there. It's already a real problem there. So, you're creating a huge problem in the neighborhood for, something that probably is not needed now. So what are you going to do? Well, I got some of the discussion here that doing a pedestrian underpass is difficult, but if they do the underpass as you've got it planned, but skip the roundabouts and just make it pedestrian only, should the need ever arise for more car traffic, then you're prepped for it. You only put in the roundabouts. But this should not be, you don't even, it's not a problem to have a bigger underpass if you're doing bike ped, and it would prepare you for the future without a huge amount of redesign. So anyway, thanks for looking at this again, and I look forward to DOT's presentation.
Thank you, John. And I see next on the list to provide comment is Emily Weiser.
Yeah, thanks.
ahead.
This is, oh, thanks. Yeah, this is Emily Weiser. I'm with Bike Anchorage, and I just wanted to note that, I can't speak for the policy committee, but as a member of the public, I think I agree with the proposed rewording that you were talking about for the memo, where really the spirit of this, as I understand it, is for a grade separated bike ped crossing, not necessarily an underpass per se. So just wanted to note that and support that change if you decide to make it. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you, Emily. Looks like on my end, I see that's the last hand raise, or do we have another? No, it's like looks like we have another hand raise. Cheryl, go ahead, you can provide your comment now. Looks like you're on mute still, Cheryl.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Okay. I have to say I'm really thankful that you folks are digging into some of the big policy issues we have here. And I really appreciated your discussion of Rabbit Creek Road. Sometimes this committee has been a little bit sleepy, and I'm hoping that the issues here are important enough to devote some time on them in between these formal meetings. I'm looking forward to answering some of the questions. I believe Aaron listed questions that Nancy and I had put together recently in the comments section for this meeting. I was frankly surprised that the current plan presented to you was to have ADOT show up on November 3 and explain the rationale for this project. When I listened to the policy committee put together their request to you, I heard them want your technical advice on how to resolve these issues. And if you look at the Assembly resolution, there are a lot of issues in there, as has been raised at this meeting. You folks have acknowledged that. That's land use, cost, priority, opportunity costs. So I think this is a really great opportunity for the Technical Advisory Committee to play a role in addressing the future of Anchorage's transportation, policy and spending. And this is one major illustration, this big 92nd Avenue grade separated crossing is an illustration, as is Rabbit Creek Road. But right now this is on the table. And so I'm really hoping that today you will give direction, that there be exploration of these issues in a structured way, culminating maybe even in October by a recommendation to the policy committee of these are the issues we're considering, here's what we've found, here's what we have not found, and here's what we can recommend you do next. So thanks very much, folks.
Thank you, Cheryl. It looks like I have
the one time only for public comment. So I see Daniel Boland has raised his hand, but he's had his.
Okay, sorry, Daniel. Our rules have that you've spoken on this item so far, so.
Great. Is there going to be a future opportunity for me to get back in the queue once we move on from public comment? Can you advise me as my role as an alternate member?
So I think your next opportunity, I guess for this topic, right, it would be at our next meeting when we talk about it versus, I guess at the end of this meeting, there is public comment that's not related, but I guess we wouldn't want it to be focused on this topic.
I guess what is being asked is he wanting to give another testimony. What exactly?
I guess I'd like
So
to.
I think, let's do this, Daniel. If you want to speak to the public, be a chance to be able to, versus speaking to this specific motion, specific action item. And that would be a time when you could make some public comments. Otherwise, I think it'll be waiting until the next meeting.
Okay, noted. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, so that looks like that goes through all the public comments that we have at the moment.
There's something in the chat.
There's something in the chat. Okay, and it's a different person. Would you like to read it for us?
I'm muting somebody. Okay, no.
Yeah, this comment comes from
Just speak a little louder.
Anna Bozen, giving the design details that can enhance the comfort of non-motorized users, natural light, breaks and cover, line of sight for adjacent traffic, wider separation between bikes, e-bikes versus pedestrians. She's placed a link in the chat, and then follow up to say both bridges and underpasses should be accessible to all pedestrians, including those in wheelchairs.
Okay, perfect. So it sounds like those are comments about what she would be suggesting that the non-motorized underpassing would consider. Okay, so obviously that goes through our public comments. What is the will of the committee?
I just want to make a couple of quick comments. You probably should have made them earlier, but two things to keep in mind with this is that this project, as it's written here, is in the MTP. It's in the current MTP. I believe it was in the one before that, but it's certainly in the current one. In other words, AMATs all had the opportunity, public had an opportunity, et cetera. And we approved it saying, build this project as it's written in the tip. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is not part of the AMATs allocation. So the ability that what AMATs can do with this project is we can certainly offer comments to DOT and say, hey, here's some thoughts on what you might want to do with this, and they can do with what them as they would like. But we cannot take the funding allocated for this project and decide to move it over to another project. AMATs does not control this allocation. The state can decide what to do with that allocation. AMATs can say, we want that entire project out of the TIP and delete it from the TIP. But then DOT gets to decide what to do with those funds then. So there's just to keep that in mind. That's our opportunity with this project. Again, we can make all of these comments and suggest to DOT, hey, you might want to look at this, think about this, all the things that are in the resolution, we can do those things. And that's just fine, but we don't decide the allocation of these funds. And again, this project is in our current MTP as a project that is part of the municipal, the Anchorage transportation system for the next 20 years.
Thank you, Craig and Sir Ryan. Should we make a motion and then have more discussion? Is that probably the best? Okay, so what is the will of the committee regarding this item?
Well, to start the discussion, I'll move that we forward the memo as drafted by AMAT's staff to the policy committee.
Does this go to the policy committee or
No, it would go directly to the.
Oh, to
project.
DOT. Yes, we forward it to DOT as written, just for the sake of
It
discussion.
doesn't need to go to the policy committee, it's has to DOT.
Yeah, the policy committee gave direction to the TAC to do this. And so it would come directly from, well, me, from the technical advisor. We could change it if you guys are uncomfortable with me sending it. Instead, it can have the chair send it, whoever. It doesn't really, it just needs to come from us at this level to project manager to DOT. And I do want to note, there are a few minor changes that have to be made to the memo, regardless of what you guys do with it. Under the whereases, when I copied it over from the assembly resolution, I kept in some of the line item numbers. So I will need to remove those if you end up voting, just as
Okay, so
Do you need a second?
we need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Coy, second by Mr. Buckle. And so additional discussion, it sounds like those line item numbers will be removed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Since we did the motion as written, I'd like to amend the motion to take out just flat underpass, just say grade separated crossing. With the expectation that we will at least get some bookends under, over. But I'm not sure
I guess if,
how the language that in here, but you know.
given that it's floating with the policy committee pass, I wonder if
Can add it in the bottom,
in the bottom, like we're asking, we
just
just
wherever appropriate.
clarify.
But I just, like I said, I just want to see the bookends under, over, and. That would be my motion.
Okay, go ahead, Craig, what are your thoughts? Which we,
You need a second to my amendment.
okay, second, I just really need, sorry. Discussion on that,
That's the do.
right? So one idea that I had about how to do exactly what you're proposing is that in this paragraph that's following all the whereases, where it says, the TAC is asking for your assistance in reviewing the request from the PC and the Assembly resolution and providing an input response. The written follow-up at the November 3rd, 2022 TAC meeting, that we insert a sentence that says, this response should include an analysis and cost estimate for non-motorized grade separated, a non-motorized grade separated concept. Say concepts.
I would say concept.
Concepts for non-motorized grade separated concepts. To include,
At least one under, one over, and I don't know what's left after that.
right, and if it wanted to look at the traffic, if it wanted to look at, there could be some specific things that are in there, or we could leave it open and let DOT take that, so there's at least some specificity of what they're looking at. So is that, that's fine, okay. So,
you're gonna need would that clarify that, it was all over.
okay,
Okay, so fine.
Because I got, this response should include an analysis and cost estimate for non-motorized grade separated concepts to include one over, one under, and it kind of got it, do you want traffic?
Well, I would just say at least one over, one under, and if they come up with some really genius idea in between. So do.
with at least one over, one under, and one under, including traffic considerations.
I'll look at traffic. Now we are starting to get.
Right, okay, so maybe let's just stop right there and.
They'll tell us what the implications of the traffic
Yeah.
are.
Okay, sounds good, we stop there then. And so, do you accept, I guess, that wording?
I do.
And Mr. Lee, your seconds, okay. There we go, so the friendly amendment to that amendment was.
I'll read it back to make sure everyone knows. This is adding a sentence to the paragraph right after the whereases. So right after it talks about follow-up at the November 3rd meeting, the next sentence is the following. This response should include an analysis and cost estimate for non-motorized grade separated concepts. Sorry, I should say for non-motorized grade separated concepts to include at least one over and one under. That's all.
Okay, that was motion on the table for the amendment to the letter. Some additional discussion, yes, comments?
Is this the right time to discuss before we?
So this would be, yes, discussion on the amendment
Yeah, right.
to the motion.
Okay, so I'm not personally convinced that the language about cost estimates is needed. Based largely on what Mr. Lyon described earlier, is that these funds, if this project went away, the funds go back to DOT for their use. So, and then looking at what the policy committee asked us to ask DOT to do. Evaluate the feasibility and impacts of only including a non-motorized underpass. I guess one would argue that the impacts are, potential impacts are that the cost would be lower if there's not a vehicle underpass, but I'm not sure personally how that helps inform a recommendation that we, or a decision that the PC would make and a recommendation that we would make. So,
I think when we talk about impacts though, don't want DOT like jump in when I misstate this. Substantial changes in what this project is. For instance, if it goes from 2 lanes, bike paths, roundabouts and everything like that to an 8-foot concrete tube, they've got risks on environmental and a variety of stuff like that, just given where they are in the process. And so I believe that we're not talking just cost risk and impact risk, but we're also talking process risk and delay. Is that correct?
And then some.
And then some, yes.
I think there's also a statement made here, the $30 million for this crossing is not the best use of federal funds. Switching to a non-motorized isn't cost free. So there's a delta there between the 30 million and what it would cost for that. So I think that's a point worth bringing.
And I agree. And as much as I love Mr. Welton's idea of just building as is, but just putting a bunch of bollards on some cars, don't use it, it would be the world's most expensive non-motorized facility in the history of time. So,
Okay, all right.
I guess a process question for you, Aaron, for AMAT staff, or maybe for you, Craig, having your experience. My understanding has been that the DAC, that we cannot change the scope of the project, right? The policy committee can remove the project or leave it in. But the scope of the project can't be changed. The policy committee, let me ask you, can the policy committee, with the stroke of a pen, make this a bike pedestrian crossing project and not a vehicle?
The federal overseers have made it very clear that we can decide what to do with the AMATS allocation. Projects that are outside of the AMATS allocation, AMATS has what they refer to as an AMATS veto. Take it out, leave it in, that's it. They cannot just change, they can't make a reconstruction or rehab, nothing like that. We can make all of these recommendations to DOT and say, here's what we think you should do with that, including just making it a non-motorized underpass only. And we can send that to DOT and they can say what they can do what they want with that. But we can't modify the language in there. So they're in or out.
And so, yeah, just kind of remember that applies to all funding that's outside. So say, for example, the railroad has funding in our TIP. The committees can't sit there and say, no, we don't want you to spend your funding on that. We want you to spend it on something else. It's pretty similar to this process as well. They put it through their process, their competitive process. We accept it if they want to accept it and include it in the TIP, and that's part of the process. What we're doing now is also part of the process where we're having discussions about it, trying to get the groups to talk about these things. That's part of the 3C process where we're cooperatively working to try and develop something, not just coercing people into doing what we want.
So other discussions on the amendment to add the language to the.
Just note that Mr. Mullen has a question in the chat. So now that we are on this item, is this an appropriate time for me as an alternate member of the PC to contribute to the conversation? So I'm assuming we still on, but just want to make sure that was pointed out.
we're still on, we'll discuss it.
Yeah, we're still on the topic.
Just wanted to make sure it didn't get too far up the chat, so we got lost.
Thanks, Greg. I think it probably isn't because we're still on the same topic. Sorry about that, Mr. Bond. So any other committee discussion on the amendment? Okay, so are there any objections to the proposed amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do a roll call again. Mr. Vasky. Do you need some clarification what the amendment is? The amendment.
There's a lot of talk, and I think the amendment is.
The amendment is to add a sentence to this letter. That I'll have Aaron quote it because it goes right in the middle of the paragraph below the whereas.
It says this response should include an analysis and cost estimate for non-motorized grade separated concepts to include at least one over and one under.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that amendment has now been accepted into the letter. That the motion on the table then is to approve the
Motion as amended.
motion as amended. Okay, are there any objection? Do we have more discussion or we just move to the?
You can have more discussion if you want.
Okay, does anybody want to have more discussion or do we move to the motion? Okay, I think we've talked about this quite a bit. Okay, let's move to the motion then. Are there any objections to accepting the motion to move this letter with the amendment that we're just?
I'm sorry, Brad. I do have, I guess, a question or a discussion. So as I read it, we'll make this motion that goes to DOT, and then we revisit it on November 3rd. That's the first time we'll see any information we get from DOT, presumably.
Yes.
And then the PC meeting is when? 2 weeks after that?
2 weeks after that.
It is, just for the group, is that meeting enough time for us to evaluate the information that we receive back? And then I guess at that point, we make a recommendation for that information.
You do not have to make a recommendation.
We're just seeing it.
Seems to be missed by some of the people. You don't have to make a recommendation at the November 3rd. It is just to start this discussion. And then at the PC meeting in November, we give an update on where we're at with this status. So basically, I'm going to report to the PC what happened at the technical advisory committee. Just so you know, whatever you decide today, I will be reporting it to the policy committee later this month to let them know where we're at, to keep them updated throughout this process.
I got leftover turkey sandwiches, so it was headed toward the.
Yeah, I have one more quick question on that.
Yes.
The October versus November question. Does DOT need till November for what we've added into this versus October? Does that make a difference for you? And the other question is from AMAS, we've got other things that are coming up on our agendas. Does October, November, because it's going to take time to do this, is one or the other better? Let's do the AMAS first, then we'll do the DOT question.
Just a second, let me look at the committees. I believe October is packed, because one of the things we're gonna have to be doing is getting the UPWP approved and a few other items, so.
Our workflow, let's say.
So there's only, I'm sorry, the PC one, it has a number of jam-packed. The TAC only has 2 items right now for October, UPWP approval and FAC nomination. However, there are 3 informational items. We have the Seward to Glen presentation, an MTP model information, and then some information about 36th Avenue interchange.
10 minutes each.
Okay, so they could be fast, so we could fit this in, is what I'm hearing. It might be a little bit tight, but we could. So I guess the question then goes to DOT. Is something what we're asking doable to have November? I mean, the more time, the better for us. You know, the sooner the better, right?
But, yeah, so we had already looked at an overpass. That's an easy one. We could do that in October. If, the request was now to look at an underpass. And those impacts are tremendous. There's a underlying water main burying that under another, 10 feet of embankment, working with AWU, potential impacts there. I mean, the amount of fill that would be required for it, modeling up and downstream on both the ramps would have to be raised. All the lighting on the main line would have to be looked at again. It's a lot of work. Tens of thousands of dollars, if not $50,000. Of major looking at big impacts. If we're just looking at, planning level estimates, we could probably spit something out. But the undercrossing, it's
It's a lot.
So you're saying that you would be till November? So.
Yeah. If you want good information.
Yeah, I think this is important to have good information. So we could really have a comparison. Not my perspective, I guess. So that we've got this motion, any other comments, questions, discussion, I guess, on the motion? Okay.
This sounds significant enough that maybe it ought to be its own special meeting.
For my sense, I think we see what they have in November, like I said, just squarely going towards the work session.
Okay, so we decide at that point.
Okay. What we have lined up is asking DOT to do the analysis, to come with comparative non-motorized projects. There's a clear, this is what it would look like, this is how it would be. That sounds like they already are gonna come explain how they arrived at where they're at, so that there can be a full understanding, given it's a DOT project. And then we'll talk about it in November, decide from there where we go.
Well, we also need to understand the impacts of changing it, because like I said, my sense is that they're not zero from a process federal highway standpoint.
Okay.
If I may.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the question was asked at the policy committee, you know, where the project was in its development. So the project is 99.9% complete design. Right-of-way acquisition is 99% complete, including the soccer fields that we're talking about, all the private acquisitions, including relocating any of the affected mobile home trailer court folks. You know, acquisitions all up and down east side of Brayton Drive. Utility relocations is really all we have left, and we are.
So what's the question?
Well, I guess.
The policy committee approved it as it was and did specify that you should stop the.
Yeah, so I'm making the point that the project, they asked the question where the project was as far as completion and when we were expecting to move it forward to construction. Like that answer is April. Is when we are expecting to be there. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Are we ready to, let's move this forward, and are there any objections to approving the motion on the table, which is adopting or sending this letter with the amendment to DOT? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. We have about 7 minutes left on the meeting. It looks like there are no project and plan updates, so I think if we go through quickly, we should be able to get through, right? Okay, so is there any general information items?
No.
And how about, you had wanted to make some comments. Is it part of the committee comments?
Yes, part of the committee comments.
Okay, so let's move into the committee comments, and I'll give it to Aaron first.
Okay, I have 3 really quick ones. First, I would like to introduce our new planner. Chelsea Ward Waller has joined AMAT staff as our new planner, so we're very excited to have her on board. She brings a lot of good experience with her, and she will be taking over future updates of the MTP. So she'll be working with me to finish this MTP, and then she'll be the lead on all future MTP updates, which I'm very excited about. She'll also be responsible for the ITS, TSMO, CMP, those kind of related topics, as well, potentially a future climate action plan by AMAT. So we'll look forward to that. So I'd like everyone to welcome Chelsea.
And I will just comment that I tried to get her to AMAT for about 6 years, so I'm a little hurt that she waited. AMAT's coordinator to do that anymore.
Okay, and moving on to the next one. Unfortunately, some sad news. We just got told that Shana Kilcoyne has accepted a new job elsewhere, so she will be leaving municipal service here on the 22nd. So she was unable to make it to today's meeting, but she will not make it to the next month's meeting. I will have to reach out to see if her position will be filled or not, or if we have to make some adjustments to the operating agreement for that position, if it will be continued. So we thank Shayna for all her efforts. I'm hoping I'll be meeting with her before she leaves, so I'll pass on any congratulations people have, but she's been an invaluable member of the committee and she will be missed. Yes, real quick, last item. This is a new process we're going to go ahead and start in AMATS. We've been receiving comments on agenda items after they're posted to have the committees look at these comments from the public. It's kind of been a little disorganized. So thankfully I sat down with Christine and me and Brad that helped kind of maybe fleshed out some of the process that we want to do for this. So what we're going to start putting in our announcements for committee meetings is a deadline for public comments to be sent to myself and Christine on agenda items. They will need to be submitted by the end of the day on Tuesday before the meeting. And then on Wednesday before the meeting, Christine and I will get it posted to the agenda page under its own little comment or column for comments. Compile all the comments in one link and send that link out to the committee members for you to review at your leisure before the meeting. Just note, these comments are not something that is being added to the agenda for action. They're not replacing anything. These are just supplemental comments that have come in from the public. They will want to make sure that are captured and consolidated and put in one location and available for the committee and other members of the public to see. So I already sent you a link today on some comments. I was a little late. I apologize. They will be earlier in the future. We're getting this all started. So, please give us any kind of feedback, whether it's working or not working, and we'll keep this information in our announcements as well. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Any other committee comments for today?
Passenger trains.
What?
Passenger trains are ratcheting down in 2 weeks. Gravel trains are picking up. So. Or fast, quiet trains for big, long, slow, crazy trains.
Okay.
Enjoy your breaks.
One thing that I do want to mention too is that the downtown streets engineering study, which is in the tip, is top of mind for traffic and planning, and we're working on the scope for that. So we're excited for in a few months. That's one of the first items on my priority on the tip. So looking forward to getting that scoped and out for RFP for consultants here in a few months. That's one thing I wanted to mention today. Any other comment from the committee? Okay, are there any public comments? We've got just a few minutes. If not, we're going to, looks like we do have one person and we've got 2 minutes. So what do I do on that?
So we need to make it quick or we have to extend the meeting.
Okay. So first question for you before you begin, Nancy, can you stay within 2 minutes or should we extend the meeting 5 minutes to give you a few minutes?
Yes, no, I can stay within 1 minute.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like the public to understand a little better, maybe the committee to understand a little better, the sort of take it or leave it option, that not option, Hobson's choice that DOT presents with regard to their projects. I don't understand how this meets the standards that FHWA has long held of continuous, cooperative, comprehensive planning. It doesn't make sense that the local body where the project will be built shouldn't have some ongoing participation in how that project evolves. And it should evolve, especially when a project is envisioned 20 years before it finally might come to being built. And, in the case we heard today, there's been all kinds of traffic changes around the particular project, the 92nd Avenue. And it just seems that the intent is continuous, cooperative, and comprehensive. And AMAT's being told they can say that it's a take it or leave it choice. That doesn't seem to mesh with FHWA's umbrella for planning. Thank you. I guess so, please, can we please understand why that is and how that can be? Thank you.
Nancy. We are pretty much right out of time, so that can be a follow-up discussion at a later date. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, moved by Mr. Coy, seconded by Mr. Lindemood. We are adjourned at 4:30 p.m.
Thank you.